as well. Well, good afternoon, councillors and those here in attendance and anybody tuning in, whether it's now or a little bit later. So opening today's meeting at 1 p.m, we acknowledge that we meet on the unceded lands of Palawa people, the original and ongoing owners of the land here of Litchfield. Please be seated. We have a couple of apologies for today's meeting. Councillor Gibson, Councillor Palmer and also Councillor Walker, who we do wish all the best with the planned arrival of a new child. So we do wish him the best for today, him and his partner. In doing that, I have no other mayoral acknowledgements. At 3 in the agenda, we have declarations of interest. So a councillor must declare any interest that a councillor has in any matter before any discussion on that matter commences. Do we have any declarations of interest today? Councillor Pentridge? 11.1. And CEO?
Yes, thank you through the chair. I'll declare items 23.7 and 23.8, of which I'll leave the room.
Thank you. Any further? Oh, yes? Okay, thank you. No further declarations. We'll move to the confirmation of the minutes. Now, we do have some amendments to make with the amendments for the confirmation of minutes. So the minutes that were circulated, the order of meeting for the City of Launceston held on the 25th of July, they are amended to correct the title of item 8.2.1 to public questions without notice. This Ives, so Ruslan Ives, Industrial and Cultural Heritage Tamar Valley Peace Festival and celebrating Launceston's unique built heritage, so not Tasmania's, Launceston's, and that we can move now forward to the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 25th, as amended, above be confirmed as true and correct record. Somebody to move. Councillor McMahon, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Harris. All those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. Moving into agenda item number 5 now, which is council workshops. At 5.1, we have council workshops from the 25th of July to the 1st of August. The recommendation is that council notes the workshops conducted and attended since the last meeting for these purposes described. We had building height and massing project update, public interest disclosures, land and planning in levy protected areas project. What else we got there? Visitor strategy 2023, notice of motion, Tamar Valley Peace Festival funding, and also Wellington Street, Launceston, request to waive planning permit fees. Somebody to move. Councillor Britton, a seconder. Councillor Harris. Councillor Britton, would you like to speak to any workshops? Councillor Harris? Anyone around the table like to speak to any? Okay, nothing to close. All those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. As agenda item 6 is councillors' leave of absence applications, they will be addressed in closed council at 23.6. At 17.2, we have some community reports at 7.1 and 7.2. We have Reese McDowell joining us from National JobLink. Reese, great. Thank you very much for spending some time with us.
Beautiful. Thank you for having me. It's a privilege to be able to speak with you all here today. I come as a representative of National JobLink. I'm the program coordinator for the Parents Next program. NJL's been operating out of Launceston for over 30 years now, primarily in the spaces of employment and pre-employment services, with the aim to try to uplift the local community. In the space of Parents Next, we've been delivering that particular contract since 2018, and we've been supporting people through a wide variety of different methods. It's been an absolute privilege to be able to deliver Parents Next, and we're looking forward to the new iteration of the program when it gets released in November. So the provider who wins that, hopefully us, we'll see. But over the last 5.5 years, we've been able to support a wide variety of different Launcestonians to address a lot of barriers that they may be facing when it comes to employment. So in the context of Parents Next, we support parents who are on a parenting payment with a child under the age of 6 to hopefully gain sustainable long-term employment. So our goal is to work with them over the course of years to find out what the root causes are that are preventing them from finding that long-term sustainable employment and help them to resolve those issues. So that often results in things like childcare, as I'm sure we're well aware, is a consistent issue for a lot of parents out there. So we'll help them get connected with a lot of those services that are there. You know, we will upskill. We have access to different resources and finances that can support them to enter into education. One of our core philosophies around education in particular is to set people up for success. So it's not necessarily to get them to enrol into a course where they're destined to fail. It's to address the root causes that could potentially lead them to failure first and then support them into education from that point. So a lot of the ways that we do that is through easy on-ramping. So we'll look to start with some small forms of education first, because a lot of the parents that we deal with may have had negative experiences around education in the past. So we deliver a lot of short courses where we can tailor the learning style to meet the demand of our participants, to hopefully give them that positive experience back into education once again. From there, we'll look to do short-term accreditation, so things like first aid courses, because let's be honest, which parent wouldn't benefit from being capable in first aid? And then moving into things like skill sets and other short courses from there, hopefully moving into Cert 3s and onwards. We've had a lot of success doing that particular model, but not only that, around education, transport is another significant barrier that we help to address. Through our feedback methods, we've identified that a lot of the services, not just in Launceston, but the greater Australian community, aren't tailored towards parents, whereby if somebody can't attend a driving lesson, for example, they'll still get charged as a consequence. So we've developed our own driving school that's particularly tailored towards our parents that we deal with. So we have instructors that are flexible to the needs of the parents. We'll reschedule if they don't attend, that's completely fine. We're operating out of Cairns, Launceston, and Devonport as well. We'll hopefully expand from there and start helping more and more people. But yeah, so it's been fantastic to support a lot of the parents in our local community. Moving forward, we'd help to, or hope to, better connect with a lot of the other services in the community. We're already well connected, having been here for as long as we have been, but there are a lot more services that are popping up as well, which is great to see. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for listening.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Reece. Thank you very much for your time and the work that you're doing. We have our second community report here with Mark Deverill from Welcome Cultural Services.
Thank you, everyone, for allowing me the time to just come and have a chat with you about a big, significant change that's happened in Launceston for a Launceston institution. That's the Migrant Resource Centre Northern Tasmania, that has now rebranded to be Welcome Cultural Services. So I wanted to give you a bit of the background as to the why, considering that Migrant Resource Centre North has operated in Launceston for 42 years. And it's the three reasons, one being that there are two migrant resource centres in Tasmania, and it's always been extremely confusing for people to understand that they're completely separate organisations. It's confusing for the people that we support as well to understand what the differences are, because they don't need to really understand the differences, they just need the services that we provide. Another one being the language that we use in society now, and we wanted to move away from language that labels. And you'll notice in our history, the terms migrant, refugee, all those sorts of things have been used, and they actually end up labelling people. So people get referred to as migrants, as refugees. We wanted to really change our language to fit with contemporary society in terms of the language we use is around inclusivity, diversity, being culturally rich. So we've moved away from using language as migrant. When I spoke to a lot of people about how they felt about the term migrant, a lot of people said that they don't like it when it's used as a label, but they're okay with it when it describes an experience. And I think we've moved away from using it as describing an experience, and it becomes more of a label for people, and it feeds into some of the negativity that occurs within society. So we wanted to be contemporary in the way that we approach that. And the third main reason is our future direction, and that is that we are advocating to governments to really consider the way that they go about funding contracts. So rather fund contracts that specifically ask us as a service to provide supports to people from refugee or migrant backgrounds, fund us to build capacity within services that already exist in society. An example of that is after COVID, there was an increase in domestic and family violence within CALD communities. We were specifically given a bucket of money and told to start providing domestic and family violence services. It would have been better for us to have been given a bucket of money and asked to build capacity within services that already exist in the community that provide that. So we see our way forward is welcome partnering with other services that already exist to build their capacity to be more inclusive for people from CALD backgrounds, because we don't want to continue segregating people. We want people to be able to walk through the door of services that already exist, that every other member of the community actually has access to. And we're doing that through MOUs. We have MOUs with counselling services, with the Cancer Council Tasmania, trying to work out how we can support them to be more open and inclusive of people from CALD backgrounds, and how we can encourage people from CALD backgrounds to be walking through those doors, taking away the dependency people have on us. They shouldn't be dependent on our service. We effectively should be doing ourselves out of a job. So that is the main premise for Migrant Resource Centre North after 42 years, changing to be Welcome Cultural Services. And if you've seen our logo, it's amazing. The feedback's been absolutely positive. So yeah, I encourage you all to have a look at our website. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Thanks very much. Great to have the community reports here today. So moving through the agenda at 8. 8.1 is public questions on notice. 8.1.1, we have Malcolm Cowan around wood fire emissions and a clean air strategy. 8.1.2, we have Jack Bauer, community housing. I'm not sure if that's Kiefer Sutherland. It is spelt a little differently to the actor from 24, but the answer is there also. 8.1.3 is, as we mentioned in the opening address, Rosslyn Ives celebrating Launceston's unique built heritage. We also have 8.1.4, Mr. Smith, Robin Smith, hooning and what council can do, customer service charter, and also parking promotion and customer service requests. We don't have anything here at 9 with petitions or 10 at deputations, but at 8.2, as I turn my page too quickly, noting that the rules and regulations are displayed and available upon entry, we have got our public questions without notice. You may ask a total of 3 questions each. Public questions without notice. Mr. Shaw.
Today, councillors are going to be asked to vote to bypass a couple of acts to allow paying a consultant an amount over $250,000, namely the Section 3331 and of 1993. Anyway, forget the act, but to allow them to pay out a figure over $250,000. That figure happens to be $514,000 to a company called Mesh to deliver a plan for St Leonards. And we need to develop St Leonards, and I support that fully. And it's been identified by the Walensky report that it's crucial to do that. It's also been reported that South Prospect will account for 37% of Tasmania's housing over the next 12 years. Mesh were the company that 5 years ago council engaged to develop a plan for South Prospect. They failed to do that. So, and in the agenda, I think on page 62, it lists a couple of Mesh's achievements. it doesn't mention the failure of South Prospect. So there's a couple of specific questions, or 3 specific questions I'd like to ask. Specifically, why in the agenda does it not say that Mesh, who are a mainland company, failed to deliver on the South Prospect development when they had 5 years? There was 2 landowners. So that's the first question. Why did our agenda fail to mention Mesh's failures? Second question is, why would the ratepayers and council expect a different result when we're using the same middle management at council, and we have 2 new ones, and top manager being Chelsea and Sam, so I'm excluding it. We've got the same middle management, and we're going to use the same consultant. Why would we, and we've only got 10 months to do it in, and 112 landowners, why would we expect them to deliver a different result? The third question, how much money in total has the City of Launceston paid to Mesh for the works that they did at South Prospect, which at this stage is sitting on the scrap heap? So how much money in total has the City of Launceston paid to Mesh, a mainland company, for the South Prospect development at this point in time? A little bit mixed up a little bit how I've delivered that, but hopefully I've got 3 clear questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Thank you for those questions. Noting that there is quite a bit in those questions, I'm going to throw to the CEO, who's taking some notes here also.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw, and through the chair. So just to clarify, and I'll probably work in reverse order if that's okay, Mr. Shaw. The last question, how much has council, the City of Launceston, paid to Mesh for the South Prospect development, which I understand you're one of the 2 proponents for the South Prospect development. I just want to be clear that that's specifically the amount you're looking for, and I'll take that on notice because clearly I don't have that exact number at this point in time. So if that is the case, I can get you that result. Working back to your second question in respect to middle management of council specifically, I'm not going to discuss HR matters in a public arena. I'm certainly not going to single out any of our staff, and I will fully support all of our staff to deliver all of the functions required by council. But I will reiterate that we are not expecting our staff to actually deliver this project, hence the engagement of Mesh. Mesh will actually be undertaking this work should council support the report that is within the agenda today. And the last question, Mesh in terms of, and I quote you, Mesh failed. They're not my words. I'm not aware of the work that Mesh did previously. Certainly happy to find out. I wouldn't want to make any comment, particularly publicly in a public arena, in terms of what I deem a failure or not a failure, obviously for public litigation reasons. But I'm happy to take your comments on board that you believe Mesh has failed, as you've mentioned here on a couple of times today, in respect to South Prospect. I won't dilute the matters because St Leonards is very different to South Prospect. You're obviously very well aware because you are one of those proponents, and we are conversing some information at this point in time, as with the other applicant for South Prospect. So I'll perhaps take that on board and take it on notice in some respects as well for you. In relation to Mesh, I'm happy to look at their previous report and give you that undertaking that I will look at their previous report and the work that they did do on South Prospect previously. I can't give you a professional opinion at this point in time as to whether I believe that is a failure or not. We may have a difference of opinion in terms of what failure and success may look like in respect to that. And if I may just clarify, in your opening address, you did say that officers are recommending to bypass legislation in respect to the report. I'd just like to clarify, we're not looking to bypass legislation. We're actually utilising the legislation and giving council an opportunity to expedite the process. So the legislation does give council an opportunity to not go to public tender upon the absolute majority resolution of the council, hence why the report is within the agenda.
Further questions without notice?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Robin Smith on behalf of Coffee Republic. Question on the agenda. I'd like to continue with that question, please. The parking promotion. free parking in the city and the 3 car parks. It says, and I understand it's free parking in the city from 3:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. Do I understand the first part correctly, that after 5:30, if you're still on premises, then you pay the instant overnight fee of $2? So at any time, once the clock strikes 5:30, you're liable for the overnight fee, as opposed to being overnight and then paying at 8 o'clock next morning. That's the first thing. The second question is, when it's promoted and it's enjoy free parking in the city, it's promoted by the City of Launceston and Launceston Central together. But here it says enjoy free parking in the city 3:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. weekdays. And then it lists the car parks. Here as Patterson Street West, Patterson Street. Is it not weekends as well and public holidays? Too. Thank you.
I'll take these questions on notice, Mr. Smith.
Very
I'm
well,
not sure I would have to have a look at the individual operating hours and what those timeframes are going in and out of the actual car parks themselves.
I attended yesterday a Launceston Central hosted Tasmania Police information session for retail, hospitality and service businesses. We have them about every 2 or 3 years. Matter of CCTV coverage in the CBD came up. Someone asked if they're working. Fortuitously, I happen to have spoken off the cuff to someone that was maintaining the cameras. They seem to be cleaning all the lenses in the city. This was last Thursday. And I asked them, are they all working good? And he said, yes, they're all fine. At the meeting, however, one of the attendees said that they requested footage in St. John Street, and the cameras were all out of order. So could you perhaps firstly advise, I would expect you to say that that's wrong and they're all working. Secondly, if there have been outages in the last, say, 6 months, could we find out what that period was, what cameras? We're only talking CBD, not the other suburbs.
Okay.
If that's possible, please.
Thanks, Mr. Smith. Yeah, I will again take that one on notice so we can have a deeper dive into those conversations, having not been there and not been privy to that person's commentary. But yes, there's no reason that we can't look further into the operations of those cameras and timeframes and any outages.
Well, I did go out on a limb to say they're all working. So, fortuitously, again on today's agenda, 20.4 is the Launceston Central funding variation, which happens to include the key performance indicators for that. You will recall it wasn't so long ago that I lamented the lack of, I think the word I kept using was advocacy. Beyond marketing and promotion, the Launceston Central didn't appear to me to be an advocate for those parking or parking prices or anything that council does, CCTV or garbage collection, etc. So I felt that, but a councillor did actually speak up and said there was a system and that the city body does advocate for business, contrary to what I said. Therefore, when I read the KPIs on page 106 of today's agenda, which is page 19 of the KPI indicator, it says qualitative advocacy report. So here it says as a summary report detailing advocacy activities conducted throughout the year. It says the intention of this measure is to highlight the key advocacy actions taken throughout the year. So this is what I used as fortuitous, perhaps, and it would appear that now City Central's been in existence for a couple of years, there would be something that council's received that would be such a document as it appears to show. So would it be possible to get a copy of so that I can see what are the issues that council's receiving, perhaps through this document? And if not explicit in this document, is it possible for council to provide to me so I can get an idea of the issues that are being brought to council and the frequency they're coming to us?
Thank you.
Am I
Thank you,
clear
Mr.
with
Smith.
that?
Yep, we'll take that one notice as well and have a look at the public-facing documentation. Obviously, as councillors, we're privileged to in-person presentations and so forth from Launceston Central, so we'll look to the availability around public-facing documents for you, and I look forward to your commentary on it.
Well, if I could clarify, Mr. Mayor, it's not about public-facing documents, it's about those issues that are raised by Launceston Central to council.
Yep.
From business.
Yep, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. We'll put that in the question without notice in the responses. Thank you. Do we have any further questions without notice? Okay. We'll continue through the agenda. As mentioned, no petitions, no deputations at 9 and 10, so we move into Planning Authority. Thanks, Mark. So under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993, Council acts as a planning authority in regard to items included in this agenda. At 11.1, we have 30 Merino Street, Kings Meadows, which is a scheme amendment change of zone. Before we get to any recommendations, opening to the floor for public commentary. We have any speakers to Merino Street? No speakers? Okay, thank you. Moving to the recommendation. The recommendation is that Council agrees to and initiates this amendment to the Launceston Local Provisions Schedule. A, which is rezoning the 3.9 hectares of land from light industrial to low density residential at 30 Merino Street, Kings Meadows, and insert the priority vegetation overlay map over the rezoned land. And also at section 40F, it certifies that a draft amendment will be put through and dealt with for public exhibition of 28 days. Somebody to move the recommendation. Deputy Mayor to move. A seconder, Councillor Harris. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess this is an interesting one, and it's been sitting around for many years in a state of a block of land which has two zones on it. One is low residential, and the other one is light industrial. As I understand it, this first came to the attention of council, I think, back in about 2014, where previous development manager was approached in regards to what they could do with the land by the landowner. And subsequently, I think Launceston City Council, I've got a couple of questions I'll put at the end, have sort of taken on board to try and assist an outcome that might be reasonable for this block of land. As most of you are aware, it's a difficult block of land that sits between Connector Park and Merino Street and the name of the ridge, Drive, anyway, another residential development to the north, and which was previously developed on land which is probably not dissimilar to what this land is now. The officers have come to us with a recommendation that we end up with one zone, and the view is that low residential is the best zoning for that land. It's interesting and probably important to note that this land is available to be developed today on the basis of commercial, on light industrial and on residential. So there's nothing to prevent anybody or the owner of the land putting forward a development application on this land today, which could ask to remove trees, put pads in, build concrete blocks in the light industrial zone, and or building residential land, residential houses in the low res area as well. So we're not changing the fact that something can't be developed. It's actually saying that what's a better use? Is it better to remain in the light industrial, or is it better to be low res? And the officer's advice to us today is that low res. I then asked questions of the officers in regards to buffer zones and overlays. Their advice to me is at the moment there is no development application that actually exists in relation to the block of land today, and even with this changing, there is no development application that is actually relevant to this particular issue. So for a development application to come back to council, it will need to come back, and there are a number of considerations that we'll need to take in. I'll put a question mark on the end of this because my understanding is that because I was concerned, we've got vegetation overlay, we've got light industrial, and if we're going to have low res in there, the impact, and if I look down to Ridgeway Lane, I think it's called, there is a buffer zone that's been built along that boundary to Connector Park. So I question why wouldn't we do something along the ridge line of this particular development. The advice is that is something that we can take into consideration when we actually get a development application to do that. So that and the natural habitat overlays, the water easements or the water flows, and whether we take control of the water easements is something that we can also take into account when a development application is put to us for consideration. I also understand there's a block of land that exists between Connector Park and the top of this block, which might access Connector Park, which is owned by council. That is not a subject of discussion today. That's not to preclude some future application for us to turn that into a road, but that's something that a future council will need to decide. So at this point in time, the only access in and out of this block of land is Merino Street. Again, the officers have given us an indication of how many blocks could be developed under the low-res activities, but that is determined based on the configuration that's been put forward. Topographically, it's a very difficult block with 37% slopes in certain areas, so there's going to be certain, natural issues that are going to reduce the amount of development activity potential on the site. So I guess my question to the councillors, to the council officers, is to confirm what I've just said in regards to buffer zones and natural overlays and habitat. Is that something that will be dealt with at the DA point in time, or is this something we could be dealing with today?
The simple answer to that is yes. You've summed it up quite nicely. The rezoning changes the zone, but all the codes apply as they would. And so when an application comes in, we will assess it against all the codes, the relevant codes, the waterway code, the scenic code, the attenuation code for buffers, etc.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Councillor Harris is the seconder with a question first.
Just a couple of questions, if I may. If you can perhaps, I'm sort of trying to understand why we have one block of land that has two different zonings across it. Was it because the light industrial was actually part of another block of land further to the west, or was it always zoned that way? And the other bit, is it zoned general residential at the moment or low density residential?
Yeah, look, thanks for the question. Look, historically, we're a bit unsure how it's sort of got into its split zone. It's something we tend to avoid. It was, noticed probably when we were doing our transition into the statewide planning scheme. It came up in our low density and light industrial reports, basically saying, well, hang on, this probably shouldn't be zoned like that. And it required further investigation. And I guess that's where we're sort of at today. And what we're looking at is it's low density zoning, not general residential.
Thank you. But is the residential that's there currently general, or is it low density already?
Currently low density already.
Okay, no, that's good. So we'll just be extending that low density over the other bit that's light industrial. The second question I had is just in regard to the access from Merino Street. In the plan, it seems to show that the title extends along what I'll consider to be the route of the Kings Meadows rivulet. Would that in fact be a potential access to the blocks, or would the access at the top end of the current Merino Street be more likely to be the access to this particular land, taking into consideration Councillor Mackenzie's comment about the council-owned land that is to the west of the block that runs off Connector Park Drive?
Short answer there is the section that you pointed out is the rivulet, so it wouldn't be used. I wouldn't imagine it would be used as an access. I think there'd be too many constraints on that. So what we have, the legal point of access to the site currently is through Merino Street. And again, there is a road reserve through the Connector Park, but currently to get through to the site, it's via Merino Street.
Okay, thank you. And my third question is just in regard to having even low-density residential land being accessed off light industrial land. One of the characteristics of the light industrial land, even at the Merino Street end, is that there's no footpaths in that particular area. There is curbing and guttering, but of course the Connector Park Drive end doesn't even have curbing and guttering, it just has open swale drains. So what could the what is the requirement in low density residential in regard to what might be considered normal residential street construction with footpaths and drains and even to the point of sewerage and stormwater infrastructure that might come about as a result of this change?
I wouldn't want to prejudice a future development application and what we might decide. I mean, this piece of land could develop in a number of ways. It could develop with curb and channel and street lights, or it may develop in another way off a cul-de-sac or something like that, depending on the lot size. If the proposed development was to split it into 3 or 4 lots, it may not require a significant amount of infrastructure. So there is a whole range of options for how that might work. But it would be required to have, I believe it would require sewer and water. And if roads were proposed, I believe it would require curb and channel and urban street lighting and things like that.
Thank you for that. And I guess I do rise to support this, the rezoning. I'll start the process of the rezoning. It is important to realise that this is something that is not a final decision for today. It then gets open for community consultation for people to have their say on whether they think that the land should be being rezoned to low density residential. Personally, from what I can see of the land and what I know of it, having lived and passed by it many, many years, and lived nearby, I think I can understand why the officers have decided that, you know, low density residential is probably the best use of this land. It certainly doesn't seem to make itself open to light industrial use, and certainly larger blocks that comes with low density residential would ensure that more of the trees are retained. And as Councillor Mackenzie said, I would like to see that the buffer along the I guess the steep rise at the top of Merino Street, so that is what's above Clennet Hire and the other businesses in Merino Street is retained, and that any houses are then built somewhat over the crest of the hill, if you like, more rather than on the front, and doing away with that buffer, because that will provide for native animals through paths and things like that. Having said that, I do worry that if we do leave all those buffer areas there, they then come across one of the busiest roads in the Connector Road, and there is no pathway for them to cross from one side of that to the other side. So, but that isn't probably even one of our roads. I think it's a state growth road. So it is one of the problems that whilst we may do certain things to encourage the native wildlife to move freely around through what is bush areas, by putting a road through without any particular thing just increases the amount of roadkill you often see on that road. But I stand to support it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. I've got some further questions around the table. Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you. Considering that the threatened flora and fauna assessments from 2005 and specifically entails threatened species, would it be prudent to have a more contemporary document prepared now, considering that we now know, not a scientist, but I'm pretty sure that we now know that it's the common species that mitigate against climate change, as well as our focus on threatened flora and fauna? It would be remiss of me to let this debate go without asking that question.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Planning Manager Richard.
In assessing this, the council officers took the view that the natural values report that was presented with the application was sufficient. And we did that because essentially one of the reasons we did that is because this is actually a positive step for natural values. This actually imposes the natural values code onto land which doesn't have it. So it introduces consideration of natural values into decision making. It also changes the zone from light industrial, which is large scale excavations and large scale buildings, to one that is more capable of living, cohabiting with the natural values. So larger lots, less invasive development. So whilst the natural values will of course be considered, this will actually promote the future consideration of that at a time when the works are actually proposed. So if any works are proposed in the future, should this rezoning get approved, natural values will be a significant consideration, particularly in subdivision. I want to stress that the natural values code only applies in subdivision. It won't apply if somebody comes to build a house currently. So if somebody bought the low density block currently and wanted to build a house on it, the natural values wouldn't apply to that. The opportunity for the natural values is through the subdivision process, because at that point we can then consider lot size, we can consider tree management, building envelopes, and those things holistically across that site. So it's the view of the council officers that the best way to manage those values is through a residential zoning with the priority habitat overlay.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Councillor Britton.
Thank you very much. I was only going to ask a very quick question because of some correspondence we got via email from some of the residents of Ridgewood Lane. I think it's been pretty well described today that they will have their time to put a representation in after the decision. So if they do wish to do that, they can do that in the 28-day process, and I'm all for today. So thank you.
Okay, and that's correct. Just as a question, that's the correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yep, so 28-day notice. Great. Professor Raze, then Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I'm glad the council is playing an active role to find the best possible use of the land, which has been sitting there. I am also support of the view of the council about using or protect part of the vegetation overlay there. But I would like to have an overview about other use of the area, because it's so relevant to very a busy housing community. When I look at Kingsmeadow, where this land is, there has been an increase in number of housing recently. There is also increased number of housing the other side of the connector, opposite Bunning. I looked at most of the area around there, and I can't find a place where a family can go with their children and have like a place to play. The nearest one is Punchbowl. So family have to like drive all the way to go there. And I feel it's opportunity now, as the council are trying to protect some of the vegetation there, whether we can insert as well in the proposal that there will be a consideration for a community activity here, like a small version of a punchbowl recreation area.
Thank you, Professor. So the question around, I guess, is the next part of the process as to council's ability to grab open space around subdivisions and play areas as suggested.
The opportunity for council to secure areas of open space comes from subdivision, and one of the acts that we deal with provides council the opportunity to take a 5% of the land or equivalent as land, if we choose to take that, and we have some strategies around open space and play spaces, that comes from the subdivision process. If somebody wants to develop the land without a subdivision, it will be difficult for council to require provision of public open space. But should a subdivision be proposed, it will be referred to our infrastructure parks team, and they will assess the need for that open space or recreation facility in the area, and we have the ability to take land should that be the case.
Just because we managed to put the insert in B, insert the priority vegetation overlay map in the rezone area. I mean, we are going to expect some representation from the local community. And I think by putting just a clarification of that, make it like more, more clear about how we are looking for the community also to use that area. I don't know why we can't put that inserted in these.
Senior Town Planner Ian.
So when applying zones to land, the Tasmanian Planning Commission have what are called zone application guidelines. And I think what you're referring to is there an opportunity to sort of put some sort of open space and rezone it to that. And I think what Richard has previously said is probably the most correct, that when we're looking at open space, that occurs during our subdivision stage. Now, the zone application guidelines for open space, a requirement is that if it's not council-owned land, so if it's privately owned land, it needs to be identified within an open space strategy. So this site isn't within an open space strategy, so there would be no avenue to sort of follow that up and try and impose another zone or identify an area of the site for open space. However, in saying that, that's where when a subdivision does come in, that can be reviewed because it's outside of the requirements of those provisions set by the Commission.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just a question in regards to, it appears that council have taken an active role with this development application. Can you just, is that unusual? And secondly, I guess in relation to other developments we see where the developer goes off and gets their own planner to put forward a plan to council, as to why we were more engaged in this and not say to the owner of the land, you go off and do it and come back and we'll assess it. Is that sort of, I'm just interested in the context of why and how this has evolved.
I think from the planning department's perspective, that's not something that we can specifically answer because that was dealt with by a previous officer. But I do understand that through discussions with the landowner, they were seeking some assistance from council, particularly given the circumstances of the site. It's split zone and they were looking for some assistance from the council. And so the options were looked at, and it was determined that this was the most appropriate way that the planning department would work with their consultants, and the outcome of that would be presented to council.
Any further questions? A question, Councillor Kai.
Yes, thank you. Due to the housing shortage at the moment, could social housing be considered?
If the block was to go on the market, it could be bought by any person wanting to develop it. So if that was to go on the market, it could be bought by the housing department or a social housing provider.
So the choice of low density residential housing is considered for this. If it's approved as a low density residential housing area, social housing usually, wouldn't that be more high density?
I think the choice of housing, the question you originally asked was, could it be developed if a housing provider wanted to acquire a low-density residential site and develop it? Yes, they could. Would they normally choose a low-density site? Probably not.
No. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kai. Further questions around the table or speakers?
I'll speak.
And to speak,
Yeah.
Councillor Kai, for sure.
Yeah, I'll speak. So currently it's a split zone that exists there, and I feel that priority to the vegetation overlay should be given and remained. The area of the Kings Meadows Riverlet specific area plan needs to be applied. It has almost been 20 years, so I think the survey was done in 2005. The fauna survey that was completed was in 2005. And I feel that there should be a new survey should be done to measure the fauna numbers and diversity. And what else? So personally, this is my personal opinion, there is no harm in the vacant land and remaining undeveloped. The zoning proposal seems to offer developers a free pass to a large part of that area, and I would argue that this is not what council as a planning authority needs to be doing. Areas such as these are becoming scarce, and we should see these natural spaces as assets for careful consideration. And lastly, there is the traffic congestion problems around the connector area, and access to more housing in the recommended residential housing zone area needs to be a matter to consider in planning how to access roads around that space. So today, unfortunately, I will not be supporting the planning officer's recommendation to change from light industrial to low density residential. I feel that we should A, do another fauna survey, and B, have some community consultation first. I understand that there is a 28 days for representations to be put in, but through experience, I feel like it's better to get the community's ideas and views first before we put it out as a DA. And how would you put it? And then with there is residential. There's a phone ringing. Okay, sorry. So that's just my view, and I will not be supporting this recommendation today. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Kai.
There is.
I think that's been really clear. Thank you, Councillor Kai. With some consultation up here, Planning Manager Richard, just to put some clarity over the current zoning, the ability for that land to be flattened tomorrow, and what this rezoning potentially might look like, but just from an expert that's not me.
Yeah, I think it's important, as pointed out by the Deputy Mayor at the beginning of this debate, is that the land is available for development now. And someone can come in today and develop the light industrial site for light industrial purposes, bench the site and take the trees away. So by not rezoning this, that is not a mechanism to maintain the site in an undeveloped state. The opportunity, the premise of this rezoning is to ensure that the development has the opportunity to be more sensitive to the natural values and apply the priority vegetation overlay over a site that currently has no protection.
Sorry, my misunderstanding. I thought there was a priority vegetation protection there.
Only over the residential portion.
Is that not over the whole area?
It's only over the residential portion. We are proposing to put the natural habitat, the priority vegetation overlay within this amendment. So this amendment proposes the expansion of the natural values code over the industrial site as part of changing the zone.
Right. Sorry for my misunderstanding.
Okay. Any further speakers? Deputy Mayor to close.
Thank you, and thank you for the speakers who have come before me. And I think getting back to clarity, this is a a light industrial zoned area that we're looking to rezone for low density residential. So at the moment, tomorrow they can come in with the trucks, or sorry, today they can come in with the trucks, flatten the block and build light industrial. So and secondly, we don't have a DA on anything at this point in time. So as part of this, and I think this is where the officer plainly set out, is the fact that we're actually being able to put the priority vegetation overlay over this block of land, which we currently don't have. So therefore, in many ways, it actually protects what's there now more than it currently does. I take on board some of the representations that have come into us by people who live in Ridgeway Lane. The reality of it is today, tomorrow, if we do nothing, their site could be demolished, the natural habitat, all those sorts of things could change if the developer wanted to go. Now, you might take a punt and say, well, nothing's been done in the last 20 or 30 years, too hard, won't do it. And that may be the case, so that's the issue. But the reality is the zoning at this point in time says that they can do whatever they like in regards to a light industrial, provided the DA fits the requirements of that. So I think from what I can see, this is a better outcome for the land. It gives us more controls. It gives us the opportunity, when a DA is lodged, to be able to look at buffer zones, look at habitat, look at densities, look at trees, look at all those sorts of things to ensure that we can manage that to our best advantage, or to the best advantage. So I think this was a good common sense development or sort of application. As I say, we've got 28 days for the public to make their representations to us, which will then come back as a council and consider the input that comes back in from them. And even when that happens, if we then decide to pass it, despite what they might or might not say, it goes to the planning authority, who will then has an opportunity to hold further hearings to decide whether they agree with it or not. So there's at least another 2 iterations where, if we've got this wrong today, somebody can challenge it and we can actually have what we're putting forward overturned. But having looked at it on the surface of it, and I've gone backwards and forwards with it, and as I said, I've looked at the overlay on the Ridgeway Lane area, and I thought, well, why can't we just carry that through there? I've asked them questions about that offline, and they've explained to me that we can still look at that. It may or may not be appropriate when a DA is applied for, because the DA might come up with something which we say, wow, that's really good what you've done, and you protect the rights and interests of everybody in the area. It's unlikely that that's going to be the case based on what I hear and see today. But I think from my perspective, this is a redundant block of land which is not really getting any use, that there's an opportunity for us to actually look at low residential, so it gives an opportunity for families. Things like traffic management and so forth like that, which is always a concern in this corridor because of the issues that already exist in the roundabout, is something that needs to be managed, but that's going to be at the DA level. At the moment, trucks can come in and out of there into a light industrial site. Cars can come in and out of there to a light industrial site if it was developed as such, and there's not a lot we can do to control that. So I take faith in the process that a DA will be the next thing that will come up from somebody to change the status of this land, and that we again will have an opportunity either at officer level, if it's uncontroversial, to deal with it through delegation, or if it's not uncontroversial, it will come back to this place. So I will be supporting this today.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Putting it to the table, all those in favour? Those against? Councillor Kai and Councillor Raze against? All other councillors present, the motion is carried. At 11.2, we have the 74 Margaret Street, Launceston Sport and Recreation change of use to a Pilates studio and an illuminated below awning sign. Before we get to recommendation, we have noted a couple of speakers to this item at 11.2. I might start with Michelle.
Thank you so much. Firstly, it's taken us 4 months to get to this point with this development application, so I believe we've ticked all the boxes for the planning department, which has taken some time. Pleasingly, they've made a recommendation for approval. A couple of points just on the objections, one being noise. Naturally, we had the appropriate testing done to ensure that we were not disturbing the local residents in particular. And just to shed a little bit of light on the long-term plan for the development of Margaret Street, we hope to be able to extend on that development and provide some residential accommodation, which obviously we all know we're well in need of. And so we have been looking to source a business to go into the commercial area that will complement the residential properties behind. So we have been very cautious and selective of the tenancy that we're looking to put in place there for that reason, which is why obviously we're conscious about the noise levels within that area. The other point that I did want to raise was around the parking. We have been asked and have complied with our plans to provide 5 to 6 car parks for the 12 users that we will have within that area, which I believe is excessive based on what we're providing, the fact that most studios in the CBD area provide no parking at all. And I do believe that we are looking to minimise parking within Launceston and try and reduce the number of vehicles in the CBD, but we're being asked to provide so many car parks for obviously very few visitors coming to the studio. So we're looking at a maximum of 12 people at once. So, you know, one thing that we will be hopefully discussing with planning is whether or not there's any ability to reduce that, because it will come at a significant cost to us to develop those 6 car parks and also reduce what we can do in the future with the residential development in behind. The church have obviously made some objections around how it will impact them. I think we've done all the testing that provides enough evidence to support that that won't be the case. We're very conscious of that. And the awning side of it was quite a frustration because it is an existing awning. And just one thing I wanted to point out was that there's very little lighting along Margaret Street, and it is a bit of a safety issue in my view for people walking through that area. If anything, I believe it's going to provide more safety for people walking up and down Margaret Street. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I have a second speaker, Matt.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for hearing us. Yeah, naturally, we've probably got a bit of a biased opinion on the basis we are actually the property owners, but we have sought a potential tenant, and we were approached by a number of other potential tenancies, one of which was a 24-hour laundrette, which we didn't feel it was necessarily sympathetic to the area, and naturally some cafes and so forth, which would obviously operate in conflict to the other cafe on the corner, so we felt like a small 12-seat Pilates studio would probably be the least resistance. Complements itself to the area, the park across the road, etc. Yeah, Michelle did point out that we did have some resistance to an illuminated sign. The illuminated sign is literally hung under that awning there for the best part of 40 years, since the days of Arden's paints. It does actually work and operate. I can go and flick the thing on today, so I think that's really of no consequence. Obviously, we're looking to breathe a bit of vibrancy back into the street. The premises have been vacant for something like 16 years now. I think there was a small tenancy in between, a retail outlet, but aside from that, largely vacant. Yeah, naturally, we'd like to see it go ahead.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you. Were there any other speakers to 11.2? Okay, there being none, we'll move forward to the recommendation, which is that a permit be granted for sport and recreational change of use to a Pilates studio and an illuminated sign below the awning at 74 Margaret Street, subject to the published conditions. Somebody to move the recommendation? Councillor Harris. A seconder? Councillor Britton. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, and thank you to those 2 speakers who spoke for this particular development. A development of a Pilates studio it's surprising that it needs a change of zoning to be sport and recreation. But having never been in a Pilates studio, I can't say whether that's true or not. But having said that, there are only 4 discretionary uses on this particular development application. One is the fact that it is in a residential, and it does seem like that in a residential, Pilates studios and cafes very much seem to go together. So I think this is a good use of the building. We've already had some comments about the noise. Because of the hours of operation as stated, that is 5:30 to 8 p.m. Monday to Friday, 8 till 12 on Saturday and 9 till 12 on Sunday, should mean that the noise that might emanate outside the building, and looking at its construction, I can see why the levels will be low, because it is a very solid concrete building. So I think this is a good use for that. I also agree that illuminating the sign will in fact add some ambient light along that part of the street. It has always been a bit dark, and I possibly think because of the park on the other side that there hasn't been as many street lights. So to me, I think this is a good use. Just on the parking, it is of course outside the CBD parking exclusion zone, so that businesses inside that inner CBD don't have to provide any parking, and that's where some of the other Pilates studios may well be. So it does sit on the outer edge of the CBD zone, and hence that's why there is a requirement for a number of parking spots to be provided for any business, and hence the 5 to 6 parking spots I think would be well utilised, and at certain times of the day they will be necessary if the operator is to operate during the day, because certainly street parking along Margaret Street during the normal 9 to 5 hum of the city is usually quite busy. So I stand to support this particular motion today.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Britton is the seconder.
Thank you very much. I also stand to support the application today. I think it's a great use of the building. It's a good, it'll add to the area. We've got cafes, it's close to the CBD. Obviously ample parking being provided by the proponent as well. Obviously with the illuminated sign, that's just a bit of a planning thing that has to happen, so I can understand the frustrations, but that's where we need to go. And in terms of the representations coming from the church, I can understand, I'm sure they're all made, fairly, but to have 12 people doing Pilates next to you, I think is a pretty good outcome compared to other possibilities. So yeah, I'm all for everything today. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Britton. Now I had a question, Councillor Dawkins.
Following on from Councillor Britton's conversation, thinking about the representations, and if there was a bit of creep, like, you know, a higher impact use for this building other than the use that's been put forward, what conditions in the this DA would stop that from happening? So changing to Zumba or opening later hours, or, you know, creating some sort of noise issue that wouldn't necessarily be pertinent to this DA.
Thanks for the question there, Councillor. Yeah, I think we discussed this at our site visit, is that we are assessing what was in front of us in terms of the use and the intended parameters for that use. So yeah, it would just be similar to another application for a change of use at the site. So if they were going to change to not a Pilates studio, then we would just assess what that impact would be at the time. Yeah.
And I think if it changed without coming, so if they got a Zumba instructor into the existing building, there are specific conditions relating to noise limits. And so there are specified noise limits of 73 dBA between 5:30 a.m. and 7 a.m. and 73 dBA between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. So that the council officers would be able to assess the noise levels that are appropriate, and if they're not appropriate, there's an avenue to enforce that through the permit.
And so that then becomes an issue of compliance rather than development.
It would be.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks. I too stand to support the application. Thanks for the proponents and their conversation. I think their day job involves dealing with residential people, so I suspect they understand the nuances of all of that in regards to what they do. It's a mixed-use area. There's a coffee shop about 20 metres away. There's a church right next door, so there is activity of a non-residential nature that actually goes on there all the time. This is a shop front which has sat vacant for a number of years without use, so to me, filling up a shop front, I think, is a really good idea if somebody has the get up and go to deal with it. I know there's been some complications with previous ownerships, but now that's not there any longer. I think this is a great opportunity. I have done Pilates, and it isn't that noisy. It's usually very sombre, but there are acoustic walls panels in there as well to deaden the sound. They've done what they've been asked to do, which is get the sound report. Sound report comes in and says there's going to be very little additional ambient noise, not to mention there's a road that goes up and down and makes noise all the time. I suspect it'll just filtrate out into the traffic. So I'm very comfortable with the development as it's been put forward.
Thank you, Deputy. Any further speakers? Councillor Kai.
Thank you. Thank you to the speakers for coming in today. I, for one, live down the street, so I live and work just down the other end of Margaret Street. And when it comes to noise, I don't think anything can beat the Irish Murphy thumping all night. And personally, I think this is a great use of this space. It will complement that area compared to what we have there at the moment, which is mainly car yards. So I think it will be great. And as far as I know Pilates, I go to Pilates every week, and all you hear is instructors giving instructions with a little bit of background noise, or music, I should say, a little bit of background music. So I don't think there will be any noise issues there at all. And who knows, maybe on a nice sunny day, they might take their mats outside and cross the road and do Pilates on the park. So I would stand to support the planning officer's recommendation for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kai. Any other speakers? Councillor Harris to close.
Thank you, and thank you for the other speakers. I'm not sure you can just take a Pilates class across the road to a council park without having an appropriate council licence to do so. But nevertheless, I do agree it would make sense in summer. So with that, I'll sit down and let everyone vote on it.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Okay, putting it to the table. All of those in favour, that's all councillors present. The motion is carried. Council no longer sits as Planning Authority. Is that right? Thank you. Okay. As we move through the agenda at 12, announcements by the Mayor, 12.1, they are published in the agenda. At 13, we have councillor reports. Councillor reports from around the table, starting with Councillor Harris, then Councillor Kai.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, a couple of weeks ago now, on the Thursday, the 25th of July, I, along with a couple of other councillors and the CEO, attended the opening of the new St Luke's Health Building, where we were able to have a look at the finished product of what is an exciting reuse of a building that had sat and perhaps been well underutilised as far as the site goes. I look forward to the opportunity when we might be able to go up to have a look at the view from the 7th floor, but nevertheless the view on the ground floor with the Sweet Brew Cafe and that particular space that St Luke's have now developed there was certainly a great step forward for the city, and in fact is the first of the tall timber buildings that has been constructed in Launceston, and it's something that I personally would like to see more of, and for us to be known not only around the state or country, but in fact worldwide, that perhaps other taller buildings using a laminated timber construction method would be a great asset for our city to aspire to. Speaking of St Luke's, I also attended the funeral of the former CEO of St Luke's and former Telstra Businesswoman of the Year, Colleen McGann, OAM, on Monday. Quite a large gathering down at the Church of Apostles in Margaret Street, where parking was again at a premium. And I also had the opportunity to represent the council at the St Finbarr's School, where grades 3 and 4 students had the opportunity to ask me all about, as part of their civic education program, the role of a council, but also the role of a councillor. And it seemed most interesting to me that one of the most hotly debated questions was what time I got up. The worry is I think they thought I was collecting the rubbish, but nevertheless, they did think that if I'm getting up at 10 to 7 seemed to be a bit late. But anyway, it was nevertheless a very useful thing, and in fact, it does reinforce the need for councils, all councils and all councillors to perhaps consider making sure that we do spend our time in the education system to educate the young about how our unique electoral system works here in Tasmania, because not only do the children not understand it, but most of their parents don't as well. And I think we have the opportunity to perhaps help correct that, so that when they get to vote as 18-year-olds, they actually do understand that they only get one vote and not 5 or 12, as most of them would probably imagine. With that, I'll sit down. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Councillor Kai.
Thank you. Yesterday, I joined a large group of community members, including our Mayor Garwood and his little family, and Councillor McMahon, in Vinnie's annual walk to raise awareness during Homelessness Week. The walk began at the City Park, going through the city and finishing at Royal Park, where free sausages, soup and coffee was served up by the Vinnie's van, City Mission Snag Chat van and the Salvation Army Street Beat van. With the cost of living continuing to rise, we are seeing more and more people struggling to keep a roof over their heads. It is clear that urgent action is needed from all levels, all levels of government, working with community organisations to end homelessness. It has been exactly 12 months since when I first opened up about my own personal experience of near homelessness, losing our family home of 15 years. I still remember all the mental and emotional problems that it caused, including deep into depression. I empathise with those doing it tough, that feeling of frustration, shame, guilt and self-blame. No one under any circumstances should ever have to experience that. So let's all work together to help those less fortunate members of our community and make sure that everyone is taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kai. Further councillor reports? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. On Saturday the 27th, I attended the BAPS Festival, which was the Chariot Festival, which is an Indian cultural thing where I'm wearing my wealth, health and prosperity thing, so hopefully it works. So it was an absolutely fantastic, colourful festival. It was meant to be held down at Royal Park, but it rained rather heavily, so we sort of ended up in a shed in Newnham. But it was a really interesting thing, even though they were talking in Hindi, so I didn't understand a lot of what they were saying in the ceremonial aspects of it. But the pomp and ceremony with the chariot, which we had to drag around the streets of northern suburbs. I'm not sure. I hope the actual roadworks that we were doing or the road activity we were doing was legal. But absolutely fantastic. And they have a motto that in the joy of others lies our own, and they're very much into the giving into the community. So really interesting in that multicultural aspects of the city, which just sort of sometimes just hide, but when they pop out, they really actually make a real difference to how we live. On the 2nd of the 8th, I was up at the northern suburbs celebrating the Boomerang Bags, which are a group who come together and sew together bags for the purposes of trying to get rid of plastic out of our community. And it was great. There's a linkage in with the IGA up in Newnham where they're taking those bags. And so if you forget your own bag, then you can donate $2 to buy one of our Boomerang bags. And that $2 will go to sort of serving another charity in environmental things. So fantastic effort, and my group up at Northern Suburbs do a fantastic job in engaging the community in many activities, and this is something that we're also proud of. Yesterday morning I met Chris Oriel, who's involved in NDIS and disability, and I had a chat to him really about something I couldn't go to on Tuesday night, which is about how we sort of look at employment of disability. And I guess we're an equal opportunity employer, as are a number of other organisations are involved in. And I just wonder, and we've had access committees and things like that, but about how we actually go about a positive obligation in dealing with disability and actually employing people. Do we just put an ad in there and say we're an equal opportunity employer? Put your hand up and come and work for us. Or do we actively go out and seek people with disability to fill some of the positions? And I know we've got a log of employment opportunities that we have on our website now. So I've actually engaged with our people and culture people today about how we might more actively engage in this space. And I thought it was really worthwhile. And I think there's an online course next week, which hopefully somebody from council can attend so that we can actually live it in a more positive way. So I thought it was a really, really valuable conversation yesterday morning. Very similar to what things like Mark and Reece were talking about earlier, and how we actually engage people in our community better. And last night with the Mayor and maybe others, went along to Bring It On, the musical, which was absolutely sensational. Launceston College every year seemed to knock it out of the park, and it was just a fantastic event and very well staged. Choreography was brilliant, I thought, and so were all the performers. So bring it on.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further councillor reports? Okay, we'll move forward to questions by councillors at 14. 14.1, we have councillors' questions on notice. We don't have any that have been identified as a part of this agenda. So 14.2 is councillor questions without notice. Any councillor questions? Okay, moving forward to 15 and 16. We have nothing identified as a part of this agenda. So at 17, Community and Place Network. 17.1 is the non-application of public tender process for the St Leonards Structural Plan and Infrastructure Funding Framework. The recommendation is that Council resolves by absolute majority that the public tender process will not be applied to the procurement of a consultant to deliver St Leonards Structural Plan and Infrastructure Funding Framework because of extenuating circumstances, being that A, the constraints of the grant deed required to the project to be completed within a 12-month timeframe, and B, a public tender process may take up to 20% of the time available, therefore compromising the timelines required to complete the project on time. And at 2, accepts the tender submitted by Mesh Livable Communities Proprietary Limited for the St Leonards Structural Plan and Infrastructure Funding Framework. Somebody to move the recommendation. Deputy Mayor to move, a seconder. Councillor Harris as the seconder. Deputy Mayor.
Could I just start by just asking a couple of questions on the back of questions that were put on notice earlier? Just wanting to clarify what process that we've gone through from a value for money and I guess for appropriateness of our tender, the one that we recommend, the recommendation, to say who else. Yeah, did we go further than Mesh? Did we talk to anyone else? Did we look at who else might be available? Because I do note that they've worked for us, as this previous speaker said, in regards to South Prospect. Also believe they've worked with us in Relbia, on the Relbia plan as well. So they're a known quantity. And I also understand that they've done previous iterative work in relation to St Leonards prior to where we're at now. So could I just get the officers to perhaps give us an understanding of how we've reached the conclusion that these are the appropriate consultants for us to use, and whether we looked at other opportunities, and noting that there is a tight time frame.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Planning Manager Richard.
I think the primary reason why we've looked to use Mesh is because they understand the situation, particularly in St Leonards. They've assisted council officers in a planning and infrastructure sense across 2 or 3 of the subdivisions we've been dealing with in St Leonards. So they've got a really good understanding of the local situation. They also have an extremely good track record of delivering projects of this nature. And so we're looking to target someone who we believe to be national best practice, and we believe they fit the bill. And given they have established relationships and established knowledge of the area, given the tight timeframes, we believe that that was more able to hit the ground running and assist us to meet the very tight timelines. I think that's the essential reason why we've gone down that path.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Harris?
Thank you. Just a question regarding, I guess, the timeline. I noticed there was a media announcement to say we'd had some federal government funds for this particular work being allocated, which means we obviously would have had to apply for that before. And so I'm just trying to understand, when did we first know that this was potentially on the drawing board, that we might be able to get funding for it? And if so, did we at that point then start to commence thinking who we could get to deliver this? Or do we only wait until the end and then say, oh, we've now got the money, we have to find someone to do it? So if you just explain that particular timeline to us, if you can.
Thank you, Councillor Harris.
Richard might need to jump in here with some of my answers around timing because I don't have emails in front of me to check. So we became aware of a funding opportunity through the federal government's housing support program. Richard came and spoke to me about that and said this is an opportunity for us to fund a critical piece of strategic planning work. At that point in time, I don't think we're about to onboard our first strategic planner, so we didn't have the capacity in-house on top of our planning assessments to make an application for the funding. So in consultation with myself, Richard and I dealt with the acting CEO and said, look, we think it's a good opportunity to get some funding for a project that's already on the cards in terms of annual plan. I think from memory, we had about a week to apply. We did our best effort and we actually engaged Mesh to do the application for the funding. After that point, we managed to get something through and then we're in a bit of a holding pattern waiting to hear from the federal government if we'd been successful. They were late in telling us whether we were successful and they continue to miss deadlines with regard to telling us when we can start projects. And I just got an email while I was sitting in here telling me that we can actually commence, and any work that we commence, I think back from April, will now be eligible to be funded. So that's the chronology of events for this.
Just a final date. What's the date the project from the federal government's funding deed have to be completed by? Was that
I think
end of
that's
July,
the 31st of May 2025. Yeah, milestone 2 is the project completion by 31 May 2025, at which point 40% of the funding is provided.
A further question, Councillor Pentridge and Councillor Kai.
Ask a question. The questions that Mr. Shaw has asked is sort of quite concerning. I was just wondering whether we could, or is it possible to table this until we get the answers and then we can make a sound decision after that, or will it be too late with the funding and the grants?
General Manager or CEO around the timelines that if we were to table this, noting that in the report that it is quite time specific.
Until we get the answers for Mr. Shaw's questions, 3 questions.
Yeah, sorry, I'll take the first one first. So thank you through the Chair and Councillor Kai. In relation to timelines as printed within the agenda, we would potentially run the risk of losing part or all of the grant. We would be paid tranche 1 now on successful completion of the grant, or accepting the grant, sorry. In relation to tranche 2, that comes in, I think, about May of 2025, where we would need to actually provide to the federal government proof of completion of the project itself. In the absence of being able to do so, we would potentially run the risk of it's about 40% of the grant itself, which is not budgeted for. So if we couldn't and we weren't able to negotiate with the federal government as to why or an extension to the grant, then we would need to come back to council seeking that additional 40%, which is not currently budgeted for.
Right, and I'm just worried about what Mr. Shaw was saying about how they couldn't deliver. That's where I'm sort of a little bit concerned that if they don't deliver for us as well, we might lose all the grants too. So I was just thinking delaying a couple of weeks just to get the answers for Mr. Shaw's questions might be better than starting now and then having the same issue arise later on and then we end up losing all of the grant.
Thank you through the Chair and Councillor Kai again. I'd be cautious to mix the two matters together, noting that the question that came earlier related to South Prospect and a matter that I believe was about 5 years ago. I have already requested a copy of that document. Again, I'm not an engineer and I'm not a developer, a town planner by trade, so it'd be inappropriate for me to give that degree of professional advice on work from professional people, particularly in a public arena. I'm happy to review that report. I've already emailed Mr Shaw advising that I will read that report previously by Mesh, but again, that does relate to a very different project to what is being considered here, one being South Prospect, and of course this one before you is St Leonards.
My concern is based on personal experience as well. So with my own personal experience, because I sped up and I wanted to get things done, I didn't wait and I ended up being delayed by 4 or 5 years getting my development happened. So that's why I was just with this, it just sounded quite similar to what I've experienced. If the Mesh group does tend to have issues in delivering on time, I just didn't want it to delay our project as well.
So, Councillor Kai, if this is something that you want to deal with by the process, you can put an amendment to the table to be voted on to see if you have enough to do that, or otherwise, when this application or when this recommendation comes from our motion, it can be, you will be voting against the recommendation and the motion. So that will be your discretion,
yes,
and your right to do
so. I was just hoping that the 2 weeks, like having this table till the next council meeting, is not going to cause all that grant that we've applied for to lose all that. Yeah. Can I move a motion to have this tabled, or lay it on the table, or to have it tabled? Terminology. Yeah.
Yeah, you can, if that's what you want to do.
Just till we get more clarification, so that I'm not as concerned of the past repeating itself. Yeah.
No, that's your right to do that. So
thank you.
Through you, CEO, would you like to help Susie through what that process looks like?
Absolutely. Thank you, through the Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Kai. Just for clarity purposes, I have also been advised by Council staff that the previous work undertaken by Mesh delivered exactly what Council asked for. It's important that members recognise that Council asked for something specific. Mesh delivered what Council wanted. That doesn't mean that they delivered what maybe external stakeholders were looking for or hoping for, but they delivered exactly against what Council asked for 5 years ago. So I just wanted to clarify that point so people are very well aware of that. Councillor Kai has moved a procedural motion. That procedural motion is that the matter lay on the table and therefore will be brought back at a later point in time. That does need to be dealt with now, being a procedural motion, can't be debated, and in doing so I would ask the mover to clarify what specific information you would like brought back. In the absence of, the matter will simply be brought back as it currently stands.
I would like to, I would like Mr Shaw's 3 questions to be answered before I make this decision. Yeah?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Show somebody to second. Councillor Pentridge has seconded Susie's procedural motion. Okay, so putting it to the table then. All of those in favour to lay it on the table until Mr Shaw's 3 questions are answered and brought back to Council as is. All those in favour? Pentridge and Kai. Those against? Other remaining councillors? The motion is lost. Okay. So going back, now that that's lost, back to our original motion, moved by Deputy Mayor and Councillor Harris. We have some further questions. Did have a question with Councillor Pentridge and Councillor... Lots of questions. And Councillor McMahon and Councillor Britton. Okay, Councillor Pentridge, a question.
Some of these questions, because this isn't going to be pretty, what I have to say, so maybe these people
Okay.
can please, maybe they answer some of the questions.
That might help answer some of your questions, perhaps. Okay, so Councillor McMahon and then Councillor Britton.
Thank you. What mechanisms are in place for Mesh to complete their works to a set timeline? And if they don't, what are the repercussions?
Thank you. Councillor McMahon. Planning Manager Richard.
The project will be managed through the organisational structure of council, and there will be a project sponsor and a project manager. So that will be delivered through the Community in Place network and with support of the infrastructure network. We're planning to have a project manager, a specific project manager through Rosanna's team. So we have a cross-organisational team supported by the executive to deliver, and we'll be doing our best to monitor those deliverables and keeping the project on track at every stage.
General Manager.
We also have reporting requirements, and I don't have the email open, but the one that just came through during this meeting was I think we'll be obliged to do quarterly reporting, and we'll also be entering into a contract with Mesh, so they will need to deliver to get paid, is my very simplistic view of that.
Thank you, General Manager. Thank you, Councillor McMahon. Councillor Britton.
Thank you very much. And just to speak, and I don't mean to be controversial, and I'm not accusing anyone of anything. However, if I was to just look at it from an outsider's perspective, we've had Mesh prepare a proposal to go to the federal government with the outcome of Mesh getting the money to complete that project with the money from the federal government. As I said, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but there would be some people who might not like that scenario. I think it's a little bit weird that we've got to here without it going to through its regular tender process, and the people we've got to do the work to not go to the tender process are the people who will receive the tender. That all being said, I'm not going to stand here and get in the way of the development of St Leonards. I understand how we've got to this scenario, but it is a little bit troubling for me, to be honest. However, as I said, I'm not going to stand in the way of the development of such an important area. But yeah, if there could be some clarity, I will maybe ask one question, and that is obviously we would have known that we were going for this grant for a while. I know we might be going over old ground here, but it seems as though we're down to the wire with a week to go. We can't even, you know what I mean? How is it that we got to that scenario again if it's already been explained? Like, why are we under such a time constraint for this and at the moment? Thank you.
I might give a long answer if I can. Richard and I did have a discussion about who else might be suitable for this, and we just landed on Mesh because, not just because they'd done the application, but because they're familiar with the corridor and they've worked with developers and they've seen previous work we've done in St Leonards. The other matters around time frame, of course, I suppose it's an option for council to say we don't want federal government money to do strategic planning. That's always something that's open to the council as the decision maker. We saw this as an opportunity to get money in the door to assist us to do a project that's of strategic merit in the planning space and is critical for land supply. So there are numerous areas of the city. We have a critical land supply shortage. I've briefed you before on the fact that we need 320 homes a year for us to have a balanced housing market. We very much see St Leonards as an important, greenfield land area for that to occur. I'm trying to think what your other point was because I've gone on a mental tangent. Timing. Federal government.
An unusual process to have.
Yes, so sorry, thank you for the prompt. With regards to procurement, there was a bit of back and forth between us. When we realised we had been successful in the grant, which was a good moment to have, it then came down to, well, what are the requirements under the Act and whether we need to go to tender. Mesh's component, I think, in and of itself, so what Mesh will be paid is less than $250,000. So there is the option under our current procurement, and please tell me if I'm wrong, that if we just asked Mesh alone to do this piece of work, it wouldn't even come to this room. The issue here is that we need a lot of technical supporting reports, so other consultants to do other things like traffic impact assessments and natural values and bushfire and a bunch of other supporting reports, which, because Mesh possibly will be lead consultant, we'd like them to manage. So those will be invoiced to City of Launceston, but because Mesh is leading it, when you look at this from a project perspective, the project is over the threshold, which is why we've brought it to the room. But in and of itself, what Mesh will be paid is below the threshold. So the reason we're here is because it's a little bit different, and we're trying to be super transparent rather than do it all separately. So we've had that back and forth, and that's why we're here putting the decision to you. And again, those housing support program timeframes have been essentially eroded by the federal government. I hope they're not listening, moving very slowly.
Thanks very much. And again, I'd just like to reiterate, I wasn't accusing you or anything, but yeah, just pointing at how it may have looked to some. So thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Britton. Councillor Harris with a question.
Yeah, thank you. I guess just curious as to what, in your opinion, this report will deliver back to us once it's been completed in regard to the St Leonards area. You mentioned many areas. You had traffic reports, bushfires, landslip. So will we see a fully integrated plan that includes recreation trails, roads, where they would go, and does this then somewhat lock in what will be a number of different landowners that can only develop their land along the plan that we're going to come up with? Or will there still be the ability of a landowner saying, no, I want to put a cul-de-sac in, not a through road, as an example, as far as it gets, just to understand?
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Planning Manager Richard.
The intent of this is to develop a structure plan. Now, that's a plan at a reasonably high level. It will deal with the things that are important to deal with, but it won't go down into every single detail of every issue. It won't try and master plan the whole area, but it will lay out those things that are important for us to achieve our objectives of making this a coordinated, thoughtful corridor that's going to be a great place to live for the future residents. Now, things like coordinated open space, a logical road network, different housing tenures, activity centres, and the key building blocks will be specified, and the locations of those will be specified, I believe, because that's important to certainty. And if you're investing in the corridor, you want to know that the roads are going here so you can reasonably invest with confidence. You want to know predictably that you and your neighbour are going to be able to coordinate over the boundary. That's the purpose of it. But in terms of what lot size you have here and what lot size you have there, those will be a lot of decisions that will still be devolved back to a development application stage. It's really only those key foundational elements that are required to make this a functional and livable place that will be specified. Now, to the extent that they have to be delivered through the planning scheme, that will be a subsequent stage to this. The timing of 12 months clearly doesn't allow that to be implemented. So the product of this will be the plan. Subsequent to this will be the planning implementation. And of course, that will be a project in itself. So yeah, the delivery here is the plan. And I hope I've been sort of clear on what those elements will be. The other important element is the funding framework, because some of these investments will be significant. And the objective of this project is to try and identify how they can best be funded equitably and how the costs of those can be shared by the developer and the council potentially, so that again, that leads into the certainty of being able to develop this and understanding transparently what the costs are in order to develop.
Just a final question on that. I see, as you were talking, I recalled a high-level plan for St Leonards that included having a new, what I call commercial business activity centre that isn't where the current pub and bakery is located, but somewhat off to the south and west. So the plan that we are doing will in fact be that type of level plan. And was that in fact already done by Mesh when they did that back and I think I have 2017 in the back of my mind when I wasn't on council, so I'm not sure whether that was the thing. I do remember Mesh successfully delivering at Relbia, which of course abuts this area, on the planning that we had for that area. But I was just wondering whether Mesh were also the ones who did the St Leonards work as well.
No, that was when we undertook the St Leonards work, we had a strategic planning team within council, and that worked under the guidance or mentorship of Jeff Walensky. So Jeff Walensky was the lead consultant. He didn't do the work, but he worked with the council and our strategic planning team at the time. In terms of activity centres, I think there's an understanding that the St Leonards corridor, if there's another 3,000 plus houses, 5,000 plus people, will require an additional activity centre. I think the understanding is that we may need a supermarket-based centre to ensure that people can reasonably live their lives without driving into Newstead or to Kmart every time they need a pint of milk. So those are choices that still remain. Some work was done in 2017, but time has passed and some of those sites have been developed and they've changed land uses. So part of this is to re-look at those problems and try with a contemporary focus and try and work out solutions that work for today.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Any further questions? Councillor Pentridge? Question or to speak? Well, we just haven't had the mover and the second to speak just yet. Thank you, though. Okay, so the mover was the Deputy Mayor and second was Councillor Harris.
Yeah, and thank you for all the questions and the responses from officers. To me, I think we've got 327,000 reasons why we should be looking to make a decision today, because I think if we don't, the timelines are compressing, which I think is the reason why we've got it here today. So, in my view, if we don't want to go forward with the St Leonards plan today and maybe do that at some other stage, then let's not make a decision. But my sense is, and I accept comments made by Mr Shaw, I expect the responses back from the CEO in regards to what Mesh has delivered for us in the past. And in my view, Mesh do have a head start because they actually know something about the project for work they've already done in the area. So there is some sense associated with that, ensuring that the due diligence has been done to the extent that it can be. It's unfortunate that we can't have a true tender process and this question wouldn't have been arisen, but the fact is that we're here today to make a decision. And I'm comfortable with the officers in what they put forward to us and the reasons why. They've discussed it, and I thank the officer in telling us that we may not have even needed to brought that here, but for transparency reasons, it's here for us to discuss. So I'm clearly in favour of us getting on with this structure plan. It's something that we need to do. Again, South Prospect is happening in the ways it's happening, and I appreciate that there's disappointment in the way that that's got to where it's got to from Mr Shaw and others. But we are where we are. So my pragmatic me says we need to get moving forward with this one because it's really important to the future of our city. And I'm prepared to look at the fact that Mesh have done work for us in the past. Council officers have been satisfied with the work they've done for us. They're going to be able to deliver it in the timelines that we require it, and it's being funded largely by the government.
Thank you, Deputy. Councillor Harris is the seconder.
I might reserve my right at the moment.
Okay, further speakers? Councillor Pentridge?
I can't level this. I'd like to thank Mr Shaw, and I think his presentation at least made sense to me. Everything we do here is so predictable. It was 10 years ago that there was a meeting held at St Leonards. Mr Jamieson turned up and got an earful. I'll leave it to your imagination who gave him the earful, right? And I think it was described as a quaint little village that we needed to develop. Now, I've been in council now going on 2 years, and up until the last few months, and it was only at the demise of Prospect South. All the stories I've heard is how Prospect South was going to be the be-all to end-all. And it just amazes me that the people that were working on Prospect South, there's no mention of that in this report. I mean, it is so predictable what happens here. The officers, for 30 odd, when you read, so let's just read some of the words here, right? This is going to take us into the next 30 years, right? And beyond. Waverley is identified as the Greater Launceston Plan as a key growth area. When did that become a clear or a growth area of this importance, right? When everything went wrong with Prospect South? I mean, something's horribly wrong here, right? Because we're getting advice, and what I object to very strongly, this community elected 12 aldermen, not to support the administration, but to support their interests. None of this here will pass the pub test. None of this is transparent. It's just it's a whole heap of written stuff, which I don't believe one bit of it. I mean, we had all this time. I mean, let's take a look here. It's critical that the land supply shortage. When did it become critical? When Prospect South fell over? I mean, this is just silly, right? Now, they won't go on, but you unlock high-quality development. We had abandoned St Leonards. We've got no road structure there to service it. The services will not adequately support what we're proposing. Right? Now, this is horrible. And then now all of a sudden, it's critical. We've got to drop everything. And look, might I remind all of you, and the purpose of this is I want, this will be recorded, and the people who vote for this will be recorded. And this is wrong, in that, safeguards were put in place in the legislations to protect, and these safeguards were put in by better people than all of us. It was put in there so that things don't go amok. And here we are now being asked to throw those safeguards away and go along because, after all this time, we're running out of time now and we better do it or we're going to lose something. Something's wrong here. So this can do, which is what I won't be supporting. And thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pentridge. Councillor Dawkins.
I'm really hoping that I can maintain a professional air in this debate because I'm really quite upset by what I've just heard. The idea that there's some malfeasance here because we need to work to a timescale is unbelievable. I've been on council for 10 years now. We've been talking about St Leonards for 10 years. The idea that somehow my vote and who I represent and who I am as a councillor is beholden to another councillor's perception is utterly beyond me. I'm here to speak for myself and I will always speak for myself, listen to the experts in the room and make a vote based on what I believe to be appropriate. In this case, I will be supporting the officer's recommendations. I understand what you've put before us. I understand there is a time constraint. It's important that we can grab any funds from the federal government to help us develop our community. Of course there's a critical need for housing. I mean, all you need to do is read any news site to understand that there is a critical need for housing. Why we need it in a community that fails to increase its population is astounding, but I understand we do because people live in different ways now. People live alone, they live alone longer, our requirements for housing have changed. We don't have a lot of high-density housing. We have developed our community in a certain way that represents the topography of this city and the needs for this community. And so it is critical that we continue to look and explore for parcels of land. And without scoping that to understand what it is that we need, we're walking blindly. Then I think our community should be concerned. They should be very concerned. We're seeking expertise to understand what it is for this community. We know that it's more than just opening up parcels of land for housing. There's a lot of infrastructure that's going to be required to ensure that St Leonards can thrive as a community. And that's what we are being asked to do today. So I have no hesitation in supporting it. I'll stand by my decision to support it. And I take incredible umbrage that somebody else should try and tell me how to vote.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Further speakers around the table? Councillor Harris is the seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. When faced with a difficult decision, I am lucky that I have the Rotary four-way test to fall back on, to help me analyse what is being put to me. The first is it the truth? Is what the officers are telling us the truth? Is it fair and reasonable? Does it sound logical? It does. Is it fair to all concerned? It certainly is to the developers, who would then have a plan. It perhaps is unfair to any other company who might have been able to provide the consultancy firm, the consultancy report, but I think the number of people that could do that are limited, as being provided by by reference from our council staff. Does it build goodwill and better friendships? It may not for all of them, but nevertheless, I do think the last one, will it be beneficial to all concerned? It certainly will be very beneficial to this city. It would be very beneficial to the developers and the other property owners there to know what is required, and to further delay this will not help that in any shape or form. So whether the report is given to us by the consultant who did the other report to get the funding, who have a great knowledge of what's required or not, whilst it is concerning to think of it that way, I don't see it as a blocker that should stop us from going forward. I think we need to be pragmatic, as the Deputy Mayor said, or no, perhaps it was Dawkins said, Councillor Dawkins said, we must be pragmatic about this. We need this report. There is an offer of over $300,000 on the table from the federal government. And so the risk to us is low. We have quarterly reporting coming back to us. We have a dedicated project manager within the council team to ensure that our contractor will in fact deliver what is required. And they have delivered on a number of occasions in other places. How one individual feels that hasn't been delivered the result he wanted should not necessarily be considered the dividing vote. To me, that's just his opinion. Whilst I respect Mr. Shaw, he didn't get what he wanted out of it. Personally, I have lost the favour of the South Prospect development because it does sit outside the other development areas, and we have talked for some time about land being developed at Newnham, the St Leonards growth corridor, and then potentially South Prospect. So I think St Leonards has long been a part of council's plans, certainly longer than 10 years, certainly longer than the 6 years that I've been on here. So I think it's time to get on with it. It's not something we see every day about why we would go to a tender and waive the particular rules for doing it, but I think there's enough reasons for us to do it in this particular occasion, and that's why it has my support.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Now I have a further question from Councillor Britton. Oh, yes.
Thank you very much. Obviously, there's a lot of talk of South Prospect and St Leonards, and I think it's been said, and I think we do need to absolutely look at these as two totally separate things. I played devil's advocate before, and I have to say thanks very much to the officers. They provided a very good answer. Over 300 grand coming from the federal government, $200,000 for us. We need this plan. It needs to be delivered, and I understand there's plenty of differing opinions around the table and in the room as to the people doing it. But I can tell you there'd be a lot of angry people at us for throwing that $300,000 out the window if we did that today. So as I said previously, I'm not going to stand in the way of that. Good luck to Mesh, and if we get 12 months down the track and certain people are proved correct, well done, but we'll have to wait till then to see. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Britton. Any further comments around the table? Councillor McMahon.
We all sat here and listened to Councillor Kai talk about her time being homeless, losing her home, and saying that we need houses, we need roofs over people's heads, so we need to push ahead with this.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. Councillor Professor Raze.
Well, looking at this project, I think it's right by our council officer to think about the vision of the city, and St. Leonards is part of the vision for future housing. And after listening to the pros and cons, and I think we need to have some vision and how do we need to see St. Leonards developed. We can't just rely on developers with many projects here and there. We need a strategic plan for the whole area and how we would like to see it. And I think this will enable our councillor to enable them to achieve that vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. A question, Councillor Pentridge? Seeing as though you've spoken, have to be a question. You have to ask it as a question.
If I can be given a minute to see how we can word it. No, look, I think I've made my point clear, and I'll stand by it, so thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor to close.
Thank you, and thank you for the interesting conversations that we've had so far. To me, we're either going forwards or we're going backwards or we're standing still. And I've noted, and I hope people put their personal prejudices aside to say, we have a plan, and I think they mentioned Jeff Walensky, who actually did the GLP 10 years ago, who came in first, and that's where it is. It's in the GLP that St. Leonards is a very critical part of our residential future, along with South Prospect and a number of other items in and around Launceston. We're being asked today to accept a tender, or not accept a tender, accept a recommendation to appoint somebody to actually give us a structure plan for the future of St. Leonards. Our choice is to accept that and the officer's advice in regards to that and go forward, or we sit back and we leave it, kick it down the road to another day when we can find the money in our budget to do it. So it's very simple from my perspective. I think it's an important piece of work that needs to be done for the city, and I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Okay, putting it to the vote then. All of those in favour? Those against? Councillor Kai and Councillor Pentridge against. All others in favour. The motion is carried. Moving through the agenda now at 18 and 19, we have nothing identified as a part of today's meeting. So into 20, which is Organisational Services Network. 20.1, the use of the coat of arms. The recommendation here is that Council approves the use of the City of Launceston's coat of arms by the Historical Aircraft Restoration Society, HARS, for a restorational project of a Qantas Boeing 707. Now, is this the one that was owned by John Travolta? Or is there a different one? Civic Officer Elizabeth Clark with a little bit of background.
When we received the initial email, it implied that it was the one owned by John Travolta, but further information that we received from the applicant is that it's a similar plane, a Boeing 707, but it's only the fuselage and the cockpit that was salvaged from a plane that did have a name of Tasmania on it at one stage. So they would like to restore it and restore these parts that they have salvaged and place them in a museum and promote Launceston. And the coat of arms was on a City of Launceston plane, which was a Boeing 707 as well back in the day.
Fantastic. Thank you. We will continue our own narrative along that story then too. Sounds very exciting. Okay, so with that recommendation, somebody to move. Councillor Britton, a seconder. Councillor Harris. Councillor Britton, would you like to make comment?
Oh, just very quickly. I think it's a fantastic idea, and I'll challenge anyone who thinks it isn't. Thank you.
Councillor Harris.
That was short. Yeah, I agree. It is, in fact, a great promotional opportunity for the City of Launceston to have its coat of arms on what was a Boeing 707 nose cone and fuselage at the front. It won't be the actual one that had it on it, but nevertheless, it's good publicity for the city, and I think it's an appropriate use of the council's coat of arms.
Great. Thank you. Any further comments? Deputy Mayor?
Just quickly, I think the beauty about this, and this is a very appropriate way they've gone about it. So
Yes.
I think this is a really appropriate way for paying respect to our city in asking us.
Thank you. Further comments around the table? Anything further to close, Councillor Britton? Okay, putting it to the vote. All those in favour, all councillors present, the motion is carried. Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. 20.2 is the Section 75CA agreement for protrusions over a footpath at 15 Quadrant, Launceston. The recommendation is that Council declares that the protrusions currently extending from the building facade at 15 Quadrant Mall, Launceston, remain so long as the building remains. Somebody to move. Councillor Harris, a seconder. Councillor McMahon. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. I might ask just a question on this first before I speak.
Yes.
There has been lots of discussion about these protrusions over our roadway network, including the footpath. Does this actually add it to the title, or what we're adding simply gives permission for the protrusion to remain as long as the building remains? Is there a subtle difference in there?
General Manager Louise.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Harris. It is permission for the protrusion to remain as long as the building remains. That's recorded on title. So the permission would be recorded on the title of the property.
So to ensure I understand that, that means it's not like an easement that might be put on a title which lasts forever, or anything like that. It is simply permission for it to remain, but it is recorded on the land title as such, and it can't work on, and it can't be used in any other way that this gives permission, for example, for them to build above their awning, any sort of other protrusions or otherwise, or rooms, etc.
You're correct, Councillor Harris. It doesn't give any permission other than for the existing protrusion, the existing awning to remain for as long as the building remains. Nothing else.
Thank you. And my very last question was, particularly this one at 15 the Quadrant Mall, it actually has two protrusions. One is the shop awning, as you would see, at about 2.5 metres or thereabouts. And also above the second story, it has a little peak that also protrudes over our footpath. It's not as big as the awning, but that does extend to that second peak as well, I take it.
Is your question, do we need the same permission for that protrusion, the air conditioning unit? No. Oh, I see what you mean. I can't answer that question, but I have officers in the back of the room that may be able to.
Officer Michelle or Duncan?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Harris. In answer, if it is meant to be permanent and part of the building, it will be included in the deed. It will be identified in the photo and by paragraphs in the deed. If it's an air conditioning unit and therefore not part of the building, then that sort of thing wouldn't be included.
Yep. No, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris.
With that, I'll then stand to speak to the motion, which is, this has been a bit of an ongoing saga of how what has been a feature of many of our shops for a long time, with an awning out the front, providing protection from the rain and also from the heat in summer, has become an issue once the property is being strata titled, and that protrusion that was probably built without specific council permission back in the day has to be assigned to one or more of the levels so that someone has it on their title. And this is a way to achieve that. It certainly doesn't allow in my opinion, the occupant to do anything more than allow it to remain, and I think that's very important. And I think it would also create somewhat of a precedent for how we would handle similar requests in the future. that such people who have a shop awning attached to their building that is then on just the one title without that being part of it, we have a process that would allow us to then give approval for that awning to be then considered as part of the strata title and allocated to one of the strata users. So quite happy to support this motion as it is today.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor McMahon is the seconder.
Thank you. Awnings have been part of our streetscape for hundreds of years. We are a council who promotes and supports inner city living and a thriving city centre. We need to remove barriers for people who want to live and do business in our city, and this is an opportunity for us to do just that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. Further speakers around the table? Councillor Kai.
I'm happy to support the recommendation, provided that it does not open a can of worms where owners of buildings with awnings feel that they need to get council approval. So could I get General Manager Louise to explain to the public that's listening that not all awnings need to go through this process?
Thank you, Councillor Kai. In this instance, council officers have been approached by a surveyor in relation to including this awning on the title for the building. It's not something that every building owner now needs to worry about, that we're not going around knocking on doors. It's not council being proactive in this space at all. It's about, in this instance, the surveyor wanting to be comfortable to sign off on the title of the building and wanting the awning to be reflected as part of that. It's not something that building owners need to worry about unless it's raised with them by their specialist advice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kai. Further comments around the table? Councillor Harris to close.
No, nothing further.
Great. Okay, putting it to the vote. All of those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. A weird inflection, sorry. 20.3, now we do have a little amendment here that I'll just read out, just for some clarification around the published agenda. So at 20.3, the Section 75CA agreement for protrusions over a footpath at 17 Patterson Street, Launceston. We just need to remove the additional number from recommendation 4. Note that on page 80 of the agenda, the report for this item, there is a reference to the previous item, Quadrant Mall, and that should be 17 Patterson Street. Just for clarity, that is what we will be moving. Taking that one then to the recommendation that council decides that the protrusion currently extending from the building facade at 17 Patterson Street remains so long as the building remains. Somebody to move? Councillor Harris. Seconder? Councillor Kai. Councillor Harris.
As I said last time, this is the second of these ones, another awning. In this case, the only awning on that part of the block of Patterson Street between St John Street, that was it, I knew the names, and George Street. So it is a well-used awning on wet days particularly. And again, it has come about because of the change of use of the building and the need for us to allocate it against one of the two stratum users. So happy for this to continue to be supported and pass through.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Kai.
Same. Thank you.
Cool. Any further comments around the table? Anything to close? Putting it to the vote then. All those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. 20.4, Launceston Central funding variation for 24-25. Before we do get to the recommendation for this one here this afternoon, I will open up to the floor to see if we have any speakers, in which we do.
Hello. I'm actually here with my Monica chair hat on today. So Monica Plunkett, our chair, was hoping to be here, but unfortunately she's ill. So I'm speaking on her behalf today as the chair of Launceston Central. As the chair of Launceston Central, she wanted to speak on behalf of our board of directors on this item. Our organisation wrote to the City of Launceston last month, providing a breakdown of the limited CPI-related increases that we've had to our funding over the last 5 years. As with every organisation, the cost of doing business has increased dramatically in recent years, particularly within the event sector, from the subcontracted services we require to internal costs such as wages and insurance. The work our organisation continues to deliver has a direct impact on our city and the businesses within the Launceston Central area through visitation, spend and sentiment. In order to meet the increase in administrative and operation costs, and importantly, appropriate wages and superannuation increases without affecting the delivery of our operations, we kindly request that in lieu of there having been no CPI increase in funding for the last 2 years of our current 3-year funding agreement, that this could be considered for the current financial year. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. Okay, so moving to the recommendation, which is that Council Council approves an additional 4.5% increase to the funding contribution to Launceston Central under the Launceston Central Operational Agreement for the financial year 24-25, noting that the operational agreement is for a 3-year term and this proposed increase is for the final year of this agreement, moving forward of $25,374 to a total of $589,236. Moved by Councillor Dawkins. Seconded by Councillor Kai. Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you. I think it's only reasonable that we increase in line with the 4.5% rate increase. It's impossible for us to ask organisations to do more with less, as you know, everyone's really struggling to be able to achieve their budgets and their proposals at the moment. I would like to endorse the current scope of works that the Launceston Central is undertaking. I think it's really important that we move into these third spaces. We know our community during the co-design project around City Heart, that was the element that really stuck with me, that people who wouldn't normally be surveyed in that kind of work said, we want to be able to come into the city, we don't have a lot of money, we want somewhere to come that feels like our town, that isn't just to spend cash. Now we know, of course, a city centre is about a thriving business, it is about people having that incidental activity. Of course, for councillors like Councillor McMahon, it's absolutely imperative that people come and spend money. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the kind of activity that a city centre is noted for. But having these lovely third spaces where people can come and just feel and be a part of community is so important. And I believe it's only going to get more important because everything that we know about how our society is developing right now leads us to believe that more people are going to have to do a whole lot with less, and being able to provide a place for them to feel comfortable and warm and enjoy company, enjoy music like the lounge is really something, and I applaud the imperative.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Councillor Kai.
Thank you. I will be supporting this 4.5 increased funding to the Launceston Central for all their hard work in our city. I would like to acknowledge what a magnificent job they are doing, especially within the community space, the lounge. Now, I got this quote from the Launceston Central's Activation Success Report. So the lounge is a pilot project to activate an empty shop through winter through creation of a free access, warm and inviting community third space for relaxation, rest, connection, games, music and the arts. So well done to the team and keep up the hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kai. Deputy Mayor.
Whilst I always like to see Monica, I'm really delighted Amanda's here because I just think she starts this world with a smile every day, and her enthusiasm, innovation and what you brought to the city through Launceston Central, I think has been just magnificent. We're going through tough times. The lounge has been an absolute resounding success off a great idea, and you've managed to extend that for a month by finding people who are like-minded who have put some more money to come in. So I think that the 4.5% that we're increasing it by has probably been an anomaly that we didn't have it in there in the first place. So I think it's really important that we do it. But my word is just keep up the good work.
Thank you, Deputy. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you. I'd like to reiterate that. Amanda's doing a fantastic job. The lounge is a classic example of that, and has this week organised sessions for business owners and workers with the police to deal with antisocial behaviour and give them the tools to survive those kind of incidences. So it's not just events, it's definitely bringing the community together, bringing them into the city, whether it's to buy, whether it's to sit and just enjoy being with other people. She definitely thinks outside the box, listens to what people are saying to her, and is doing a fantastic job on the ground. So I'm definitely in support of this increase.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. Any further speakers? Anything to close, Councillor Dawkins? Okay, putting it to the vote then. All of those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. Okay, at 20.5, we have 24-25 budget amendments, with the recommendation being that Council, by absolute majority, approves the following changes to the 24-25 statutory estimates. Revenue, the net increase in revenue from external grants and contributions of that number. Expenses, the net expenses in operations expenditure at 25,374. Capital works expenditure, the net increase in expenditure for external funds is that one, $15,859,925. Someone to move. Deputy Mayor. Seconded by Councillor Harris. Deputy Mayor.
It's a good thing that the last vote went the way it did. Because there are only two real things that have come in here is actually increasing the increase that we've just approved in the previous budget, the previous item, and it's bringing back into the budget something we took out of the last budget, the $15 million that were grant funding in the last budget, which was reversed at a previous meeting. It's now being brought back in because the money will be spent in this current financial year.
Thank you, Deputy. Councillor Harris.
Nothing further to add.
Any comments around the table? Anything to close? All councillors present? That is all councillors present, and this is by, we still have the right amount of people. Yep. All in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. To just do a count on that one. 7 gets us there. Absolute majority is half of everyone. Plus 1. Councillor Britton. Okay, 20.6 is representation. Representation at the National Local Government Housing Summit. I might walk out of the room for this one, Deputy Mayor. I should have declared this one. I didn't make notes of that.
There's a motion on the table there that we fund the Mayor and the CEO to attend the National Local Government Housing Summit in Adelaide on the 16th of August 2024. I don't think there are any speakers in the room in regard to that. So really I'm looking for somebody to move that. Councillor Harris, second to Councillor Dawkins. Councillor Harris.
Yes, it's important. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It is important that Launceston is represented at this important summit to understand the, I guess, federal government's view of how local government can help with the housing situation. Whether some people call it a crisis, maybe it is, but nevertheless, I think it's really important that we do have good representation there, and so that's why I'm quite happy to support both the CEO and the Mayor being away for a day or two to attend this important summit.
Second to Councillor Dawkins.
Nothing really more to add. I'm sure we'll be well represented. Only to say that the federal government have got a huge responsibility here. Of course, sending it on to local and state government to ensure that it's off their table, because it's very unpalatable for federal government to make any major changes and actually pull the levers at their disposal in order to ensure that housing has equity, especially for Zoomers and millennials. So I hope we have a focus on younger generations coming through who at this point do not believe they're going to have the same opportunities their parents had, and that is the first time in post-colonial Australia that a generation will do poorer than their parents. And unless we all do something, including the federal government, and nothing's going to change.
Any other speakers? If not, back to the mover.
Nothing further to add to that. Thank you.
So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? We're voting on whether the Mayor and the CEO are going to Adelaide to the homeless at the home. Yeah. Okay, that's all councillors present. Motion passed. Mayor, you may resume your position.
20.6, I need to fill out a form for that. Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, councillors. 20.1 and 21 and 22 have not been identified as part of today's agenda, so we do move into a recommendation for closed council at 23. The recommendation is that we move into closed council to discuss the following matters, which will be the annual remissions of rates and charges, hardship and other remissions, confirmation of minutes, the tender for the waste centre mulching of green waste, a tender for consultancy services panel 24 to 26, councillors' applications for leave, and the Chief Executive Officer's professional membership and subscriptions and performance review. Somebody to move that we go into closed council. Councillor Harris, seconded by Councillor Britton. All those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. Okay, councillors, so back in open session, can I just have somebody please move that the table of contents here is what was spoken of in closed council? I've got Councillor Harris has moved and Councillor Britton has seconded. All of those in favour? That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. We close the meeting at 4 o'clock exactly as the bell chimes, with our next meeting being here at 1 o'clock on the 22nd of August.